Okay, welcome to the Variety Hour. Our first Variety Hour. This is going to be a monthly event where we bring together people from our community who are doing interesting work, answering interesting questions on the forums, and really our goal is to create a space where we can just have a lot more flexibility in who we're inviting along and the conversations we're able to host. So today we're going to have, whoops, stop share. Yeah, we're going to have 4 speakers. The event's going to be split into 2. In the first half, we're going to have 3 speed talks, Sammy, Tobias, and Justin / Tessa. And then the second half, we're going to have 1 speaker and go a little bit more in depth and hear about Natty's work with and TNC's work with AI camera traps and network sensors and stuff. So it'll be a bit of a mix and match here. And our goal is that you should leave today or any of the Variety Hour events with just feeling like you've just had a whirlwind tour of conservation tech, and you've got a better understanding of a variety of things that are happening in our space. So to get us started on the first half of the session, I'm going to hand to Sammy first, who, so Sammy, do you want to start sharing screen? And the reason we've asked Sammy along today, well, I just wanted to hear more about her work because she dropped into our welcome thread on WILDLABS and just dropped in some interesting comments about the work she'd been doing trying to track sharks and manta rays and the challenges that presents presents on a technology side. So we asked her here to share more. Cool.
Sorry, my screen's just completely frozen.
Yeah, I can see that. Look, why don't I hand? Oh, I do have your slide deck actually. Do you want me to share for you instead?
Okay, perfect.
Do you want to stop? Are you able to stop sharing?
No.
Ooh, okay. Ellie, are you an admin?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
No one is sharing, but yes, if you do ever need me to kick someone off of sharing, I believe I can do that.
Okay, here we go. Sammy, just give me please move the slides forward if you need. Okay.
Sure. Okay, thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone from California. I'm Sammy Andrzejaczek, and for my early career research so far, I've been mostly looking at the movements of sharks and rays. And we have a few different tagging types we use with them and all have some associated challenges that I'll go through. And then I'll end with a bit of a wish list of what I wish our future tags would look like. So next slide. So one of the main types of tags we use is passive acoustic tracking. Next. And how this works is we have a tag attached to an animal, and then we have an array of receivers, or what we call hydrophones or listening arrays. And when a tagged animal swims past them, next, it will record a detection of that unique individual in space and time. So they're really accurate around where we have these arrays. Next. And what's really cool is we can have these really big collaborative networks around the world. So let's say your lab has an array somewhere and your animal swims outside into someone else's array. People can share data between these different regions. Next. But the issue is with these is they're generally coastal. It's really expensive to put these arrays offshore. And a lot of sharks and rays swim offshore. They swim really far on long migrations. And also we have no idea what these animals would be doing when they're outside the detection range of these listening arrays. Next. So to deal with some of these issues, we use look at broader ranging movements. We use satellite tracking, for which we have a few types. Next. So one of them is called location transmitting tags, or what we also call spot tags. And how these work is when the tags are exposed to the air, they will detect the presence of that tagged individual. Next. But the issue with these is sharks don't need to breathe at the surface. They're not like mammals. They have gills. So a lot of animals don't actually have to come up to the surface. And this is just a subset of 38 of over 800 species of elasmobranch. And you can see a lot of them don't even spend much time in the top 5 meters. And some don't come here at all. Next. And the other thing is you want to put these tags up as high on the animal as you can to increase the probability that it will be exposed to the surface. And you want pretty rigid attachments that can have some ethical implications and result in some deformation to the fins. Next. So another kind of satellite tracking we call is pop-up satellite tracking. And how this works is we have a tag on an animal. Next. And while it's attached to the animal, it has sensors that record light, depth, temperature, and have a really accurate clock on them. And then after a predetermined period, next, the tag will pop off the individual, next, so many animations, and transmit the information back via satellite. And these are typically attached for around 3 months to a year or so. Next. And how we record location from these is we use what we call light-based geolocation, where we're using that light level data in the tag and the clock to estimate latitude from day length and then longitude from solar noon. But as you can imagine, that can have some big errors. So these are some tracks from mantas tag off Peru. And you can see that first image on the left, it has some really big error bands, and we can't tell for sure if the animal's in Ecuador or Peru, and that can have some pretty big management implications. Next. And the other issue as well is we're really limited by battery in these instances. So we're limited by transmission of the data back to the satellite, and then how long that tag can actually be attached to an animal. Next. And then the last kind of what I broadly call as biologging next is when we actually physically recover the tag. Next. Oh yeah, and next. These are my really poor artistic things. But anyway, and when we get all the data back, we can download the entire archive time series. So from those pop-up satellite tags, we get a really fine scale time series of depth and temperature data. And next. But then we can also have some really cool sensors in these tags, such as accelerometers and cameras, and we can get the tail beat from data from the tag, make these really cool 3D plots, have some video cameras to really contextualize those movement patterns. And next. But the issue is also storage and battery. These are recording a lot of data, so we typically only get them out for a few days to a week. And we also need to physically recover the device. And for animals that move really long distances, you don't want to be going offshore looking for something that is smaller than a little handbag out in the ocean. Next. So these are like the 4 main broad types. There's other kinds, but you can just see how they're all placed. These are all on a white shark, about 12 to 15 foot animals. So you can kind of imagine how big these devices are. Next. So how do we choose what type of tag we use? First of all, always, what is your question? What is the spatial and temporal scale you want to look at? But really importantly, what does your animal do? If it goes offshore, those acoustic tags won't be of use. If it doesn't go onto the surface, those spot or location transmitting tags won't be of use. Does it even use the light zone? If not, you're going to have trouble geolocating that animal in space. How deep does it go? Some sensors will implode beyond 800 meters or 2 kilometers. How big is your animal? Some of these tags will not look good on a little 1 meter shark. How do you attach it? What are the ethical and logistical constraints? And also, how much does it cost? That tag on that whale shark there is about $10,000, which is way beyond the average PhD student's budget. And next slide. So what would I want if I could have it all? I'd ideally want all these sensors on a small tag that go out for a year and then transmit all the information back to me. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. So ideally, what are some of the things I'd want? Longer deployment durations and better data transmission. And I think we're really limited by batteries at the moment for those things. So smaller and longer duration batteries. Some onboard processing of the data that we're collecting. So if we knew the statistics we wanted, we could program the tag to calculate those and then transmit them back to us, which would, instead of having an entire time series transmitting, we just have those statistics we wanted. Some miniaturization of existing technologies, then we can get on smaller size classes and smaller species. Improving our geolocation algorithms to have more accurate location estimates, some better and more sensors. So dissolved oxygen would be really cool, chlorophyll, prey fields to really contextualize those movement patterns we've got going on. And then also thinking of some better deployment methods that could be ethically and logistically better. Shark skin is really hard to deal with. It's really different to marine mammals. Marine mammals, they have these suction cups that work really well, but that doesn't work on shark skin, which is a little like sandpaper. So yeah, I'm really interested in hearing anyone's thoughts or questions and any discussion that comes from this. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Firstly, your animations were perfection, and I love I'm a visual person, so it was a helpful thing. Hey, Thomas, did you want to jump in and just respond with your comment?
Sure. Yeah, so I pretty much did my job for everything that I would do, but aside from explaining what I do, I work here for the RBOX satellite system. And just a very brief comment on the data throughput. So right now, I think we have 6 or 7, maybe 8 satellites. There's another one going up in 2 months from now. and another one going up later this year. But starting in quarter, I think 3 of next year, so let's say June, July, we're launching 5 of 25 satellites that will be added to the AudioXD network. So by the end of 2024, we should have at least 20 additional satellites in the AudioXD constellation. So you'll go from having these large gaps of I think like 5 or 6 hours here in California down to about 7 or 8 minutes between satellite passes. So for animals that frequent the surface, you're almost going to have real-time communication. And then for the pop-up tags that carry tens of thousands of packets, I think there will be a realization that we can get the vast majority of those raw sensor data.
Super cool.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, Sammy. If people have got questions for Sammy or comments, do you want to just drop them in the chat and we can pick it up there. I'm going to hand over next to, I think it's Justin, an update from, I just assumed it would be Tessa, but we've got Justin Kitts here to give us an update from the AudioXD workshop from 2 weeks ago. Justin.
Yes, you got it. So yes, unfortunately for you all, I am not Tessa Rhinehart. I am Justin Kitts. So I'll be here, giving a quick update on a, I think, very successful meeting that we had recently at the University of Pittsburgh called AudioXD. So our lab had a award from the Academic Data Science Alliance, ADSA, and the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation to host a 3-day cross-disciplinary meeting of researchers who work with audio data and audio data analysis. We had about 40 attendees from a variety of disciplines, including, of course, ecology and conservation, but also folks representing linguistics, business, music, computer science, other disciplines. The meeting was an unconference format, so it was focused very much on participant-driven topical discussions around all sorts of questions about audio data and analysis. So, of course, from that bigger picture, what's going to be, I imagine, of most interest to the people here is we had very heavy representation of bioacoustics people in the room. Probably about 2/3 of the attendees there had some relationship with bioacoustics. And just to be clear, although it's probably obvious to this room, in this case, by bioacoustics, we mean specifically people who do field audio recording. It was mainly a terrestrial group with the goal of using that audio to learn about biodiversity distributions, species richness, abundance, things like that. We were particularly happy with the breadth, I think, of the attendees we were able to bring together. We had folks who specialize, in machine learning, all the way through people who build infrastructure and platforms for serving audio data, people from government agencies who are interested really in just application and the conservation management implications of bioacoustic surveys, as well as people who have been in the field for a while and work across all aspects of that pipeline from deployment all the way through analysis. So as I mentioned, these different groups of people had a chance to come together, help set the agenda for the discussion, and work with each other on common topics of interest. So eventually we will have a blog post, hopefully before too long, summarizing the meeting and some of the takeaways in more detail. But in short, what did we discuss and what did we take away? So 4 items that came out of the discussion that I thought were particularly interesting and important. So first one is, there are many people working on platforms for ingesting, managing, and displaying bioacoustics data. And there was agreement, certainly within the room, that we should do a better job of making these interoperable, to use Steph's word for that. We discussed the idea in particular that there didn't necessarily need to be one bioacoustic platform to rule them all, that everyone would use. In fact, that's likely both a bad idea and probably impossible, given the constraints that a lot of groups are operating under. But what we did want to see and think about is finding ways for people to be able to take different models that they've built, different annotated data sets, maybe even different field data, and move them from platform to platform and be able to share work from platform to platform. So that was one of the first big takeaways. Second one, I would say, was some discussion about having a central database or even just a list of all of the annotated data, but also field data and models that everyone has collected and generated. And again, there are some constraints some people are working under around sharing everything. And so it's not necessarily the need to share all of the data per se, which is both challenging and maybe not always possible, but certainly sharing information about what has been done so that folks know who to contact and how to talk to each other to encourage both reuse and potential collaboration. That was the second thing. From a third point, is from a technical perspective. So we did discuss species classification, of course, but I mean, the folks in the room are probably aware that, species level classification, particularly with convolutional neural networks and similar methods, is becoming a reasonably well explored space at this point. So we had some discussion about sort of what comes next from a technical perspective. And there were two kind of newer ideas, I think, that were particularly came up in discussion. One of those is a growing focus on representation learning. So thinking harder about expressing audio in these low dimensional embeddings that are general and applicable to many different types of sounds, which has some promise for both speeding up classification and also enabling progress for problems where there's very little training data, things like rare species. Another thing, or the second technical aspect, I think that came quite clearly, was focusing on tasks that are not exactly sort of the species classification problem we all know and love, but tasks like estimating species abundance from monaural recordings, automated identification of individual organisms, identification of sounds that have demographic significance, and things like that. So that was the third. And then finally, the last point was that I think there was definite enthusiasm for meeting again. I think a lot of people met for the first time, and there was definite enthusiasm for continuing to get together as a community. So we're hoping to meet again. We're hoping to even expand to include additional members of the bioacoustics community going forward, potentially some of you on this call even. We have some hopefully becoming very concrete directions that we're moving towards in that sense, including with the WILDLABS community coordinators and others here, both for virtual coordination and hopefully for more in-person meetings as well going forward in the next few years. So if you're interested in this, please do keep an eye out. You haven't seen the last of me or Steph in particular on this topic or this bioacoustics group as a whole. So we're looking forward to it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Any, okay, IBAC mini conference coming up, Carlos. There's been quite a bit of discussion in the chat around, particularly your point around bringing the first 2 points around different platforms, making sure they're interoperable, but also quite a few people talking about the need for repositories and like identifying not just data sets, but different data repositories as well. So a library of libraries, and we get a little meta here. But I don't think there are any specific questions. Justin, a question from me. What was the most surprising thing that you had come out of the workshop?
The most surprising thing, I mean, we do a lot of this. It's hard to be surprised at some level, but I think, I don't know if this was exactly a surprise per se, but you heard me say this there. So Steph was there, for those who aren't aware of why she knows so much about this. I think having it's for the US context, having the government agency representatives in the room was really important and really different. And I think, I don't know that it was surprising to people, but I think it was really important to have a lot of the folks who work more on the technology side of things engage directly with the folks who are on the management side of things and not on the technology side of things, because I think there can be sometimes a little bit of a disconnect between what seems interesting from a technical perspective and what's really being asked for from a management perspective. So I thought that was a particularly important aspect of the meeting.
Excellent. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It was yeah, it was definitely an important part of it. Any questions from anyone? Was it just US? Carly, did you want to jump in?
Yes, hi.
Good morning.
I'm on the West Coast currently, and no one needs to see me in my pajamas. So I'm not going to turn my video on. But hi, Justin, I'm very sad that I couldn't make it to the workshop. I'm at the CV for ecology thing here, so I promise I'm still doing bioacoustic things. I was just wondering if it was only US government reps, because while yes, that's very important, I think a lot of governments are run very differently. So I'd be interested on your take on how to incorporate government officials from, the range countries that we're working in and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I should say I couldn't agree more with that. I think the comment on the US agencies was more in terms of, management sort of responsibility is different in different parts of the world. And in, the US context, a lot of the agencies have a lot of monitoring work that goes on that feeds into management decision-making. We did have some representation from Canada. Steph came from the UK. Essentially the scope was limited as always by funding. We had travel support for a limited number of people. We did have, we did invite more folks from Europe, but we were also up against Dan Stowell's workshop actually. So we didn't get a lot of uptake from the UK and from Europe. I absolutely think that there should be more expansion internationally. It's just a hard problem when you're talking about in-person meetings. So it's kind of that challenge of virtual versus in-person, the value of both and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think probably the next big step is trying to convene something that crosses all the continents. I mean, that at least gets more involvement from the groups in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and some other places in Europe that have been involved in this for a very long time. I think that was the biggest missing voice, actually, was those experienced researchers from those other places, and trying to expand out from there.
Cool. Any other questions? I think Justin is at ESA, so he's going to sprint off, but you can drop questions to Justin in the thread, the discussion thread on Wild Labs if you've got follow-up questions as well. Oh, Carlos, actually, do you want to jump in? I know you've been dropping, I know you're like super involved in stuff, so do you want to just drop in a comment, jump in before I hand over? Yeah.
Yes, can do. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How's things? Just really interested to hear about the 2 recent conferences. There's been a bit of a flurry over the summer with that and the one in the Netherlands as well. The UCAN one that we did back in June in the UK, we had about 50-ish people in person and over 100, I think, online as well. The hybrid thing was not easy to organise, and luckily I had nothing to do with that, but I think it worked pretty well.
Okay, interesting.
Speakers and attendees dialing in remotely.
Yeah, we might follow up with you because there was a lot of discussions about standards and metadata and all of that sort of stuff. And I know you've been doing heaps of work on that in that space, right?
Yeah. So currently we're working on some ecoacoustic guidance, which is going to be quite sort of practical.
Who's it targeted to?
Conservation bodies, so people who are not necessarily haven't spent 10 years doing bioacoustics work, but interested in it, nature reserve managers, wildlife trusts, and conservation organisations, how they can actually implement that, so they don't have to read all the 300 papers to work out what's a good way to do an acoustic project. And it's sort of building on the WWF guidance that came out, so that Ella Browning and other guys worked on, which was sort of general principles and how you might use it. And this is going to be much more of a building on that and stepping up a layer in terms of coming out with actual sort of practical recommendations in terms of what recorders to use, how to set them up, how to deploy them in the field, and try and come up with not necessarily standards, but guidelines on how to implement a useful ecoacoustics project in the field.
That's super interesting. Have you are you going to build on Tessa's like guidance for best practice for large scale audio stuff?
Yes, this is going to be probably more focused on individual projects, so not national or regional monitoring programs, but if they wanted to implement a project on a particular nature reserve or a series of nature reserves, or within a sort of county sort of scale, how to do that. And it's going to not just look at audio moths, but the other kit that can be used, and how to deploy that, mostly for acoustic range and not ultrasound, because within the UK and other parts of Europe we've got very good guidance already for bats, for example, so we're not going to try and replicate that, but look at the use of acoustic indices or recording birds, amphibians and that sort of thing within the acoustic range.
Interesting. And one last question before I hand it over. When's that coming out?
Yes, sometime, maybe Christmas. Yeah. It was hopefully going to be this autumn, but time's not our friend. But so it's ready and out and published, ready for people to start implementing that next spring.
Awesome. It'd be great to see that on Wild Labs as well.
Yeah, we'll hit everything once it's out. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, right. Acoustics. That's a wrap. Thank you, Justin. You can scoot if you would like, or you can hang out. I'm going to hand over to Tobias, who's taking us into a quick walk through Firetail. And it's been posting some great tutorials and information about this tool, data visualization and management tool for, annotation tool for tracking data, right? Yeah, you've been posting some great stuff on Wild Labs, so I was really curious to just hear more about what it is and get a quick look through. So over to you.
Okay, so I will try. So I will try to share the screen. Yeah. Can you see things? Can you see my screen?
Sorry, I thought I had my
Yes,
we
I
can
can.
see. Yeah.
A second. Can you see it?
Yeah. Well, we saw it before, and now we can see Zoom.
Okay, now it's done. Okay. Weird. Oh, okay. No.
There you go. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Obviously, I cannot get rid of this. Okay. So, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm glad to have the possibility to present you a short primer on Firetail today. So, Firetail is done by my company, by Schoffelut-Berger, where I am for a couple of years now. So, it was originally invented by Matthias Berger here at Schoffelut-Berger in Unterhaching, a few kilometers from Munich Center in Germany. So, and a side project or another project of ours, a key project is of course like the MoveBank database that's hosted at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior. So Firetail is kind of a spin-off of that. So we have been collaborating with very closely with the fantastic Sarah Davidson and Martin Wikelski on this. And so we're pretty proud that most of what you see nowadays on MoveBank as it exists today and maintained is maintained and developed by our team at Schoffelut-Berger. And we're really grateful to be a part of this incredible resource. Also part of the Icarus team, targeted the satellite tags, and in general, the Schoffelut-Berger is providing a couple of tools for research and infrastructure. So, but let me just now focus on the Firetail idea, the core Firetail workflow. So, you know that when it comes to modern tag data, that the amount of data has grown incredibly. It's really, really awesome. Some data sets would include several gigabytes of data for just a few weeks of observations. And apart from the mere quantity of data, we also see many more types of data. So the amount of data captured by this current tags is pretty much on par with some high-end smartphones nowadays. And in general, of course, just packed and much more dense in the small devices. So what we obtain for the sensors is quite a bit more. So actually, we record speed, we record air pressure, water pressure, temperature, altitude, acceleration data, high resolution orientation data, where you can actually see, for example, in thermic conditions, how the bird moves, how the acceleration shifts sideways, and things like this in terms of IMU, inert magnetic unit data. And so, and also, of course, we got pretty used to this, but it's still amazing how we collect these incredible dense and high density GPS data, and very reliably across several years. So it's really something that Firetail is designed for, to interactively inspect this kind of data. So usually the workflow is like you upload the data to some persistent storage solution like MoveBank, and Firetail is then able to like visualize, analyze, and annotate, which is a very crucial aspect to me, most of the tag sensors out of the box from MoveBank, or you can also load it directly from the hard drive, which is a thing which can be useful when you're doing field work, for example, and you're cut off the internet for several weeks. So you can inspect your data directly via connecting your devices to the field laptop, just inspect your data immediately. So when you open Firetail, you will you will see roughly this view. So you have on the in the center viewport, you have your data, GPS data, see your individual tracks, select time, and you can then select time windows and inspect the locations. This is something that is pretty common, but the core idea of Firetail is that all this data is pretty much time-stamped. That means we can synchronize all the available data. And in Firetail, you can interactively inspect the data sets in a complete context. You see all the annotations, acceleration data, sensor data, activity data, synchronized in one place, and so to say, in a very merged view. And of course, one key feature is that you can annotate GPS and acceleration data by selecting regions and by defining categories and plug these categories into groups. So, and of course, there are numerous aspects that I cannot cover today. So, but there's a free edition that you can download with a couple of sample projects available, and you can play around with it. Have a look at our YouTube tutorials also. But one particular feature I want to show you, because I stressed it for now, and this is the machine learning annotation framework that we call Firesum. It's built around self-organizing map core, and this workflow can assist you when you're annotating large-scale data, large-scale acceleration data, in a way that it provides you with a segmentation of your acceleration data. So what you get is a set of predicted categories that reflect the patterns that live in your measurements. So then Firetail provides you with a set of tools, a set of refinement tools, and you can come up with a prediction that spans the complete data set, which is, from my perspective, a great way to work towards annotation gold standards, which I find do not exist in a way that we can use them for example, large-scale machine learning applications at the moment. So, for example, our peers over at the MPI-AB, they will use Firesum for the annotation of a few hundred animals this fall. So we will likely extend this feature quite a bit then, and take all the things that we learn from this project and integrate this into the Firesum workflow, everything that we learn in the course of this project. So, so that's basically everything I wanted to show you from Firetail today. So, and I hope it could give you a few ideas of how Firetail works. If we have time, we could do a live demo, but we'll talk about this. And it would be interesting to see how you can improve your work with MoveBank and tag data, whether you get the feedback, which is crucial for us to actually integrate, that the community feedback comes back to us. So there are also a few things that are in our pipeline, like a reporting framework or improved annotation workflows, and of course, what I stressed for the evaluation tools and the establishing of gold standards there. So if you happen to have data that is suited for this kind of evaluation and you wish to push forward things, we'll be happy to get in touch there. So that's our request to the community. Yeah, get in touch, tell us what you need, tell us the challenges, and if that sounds interesting to you, just contact me. Otherwise, let us know about the requirements. Yeah, like more data sources, more maps, audio, video support, other visuals, and other tech manufacturers as well. We also supply support for custom tech. Contact us. Yeah.
Awesome. So, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tobias. I'm quite conscious of the time. We've got a 20-minute talk and a few things, but thank you so much. And everyone,
let me just say a word of thank you to the peers there, yeah, because there's so I will not read them in detail, but just overall, thank you for all the teams that have contributed to the development of Firetail.
Awesome. So everyone, if you would like, thank you for that run through, Tobias. Everyone, if you'd like us to make space for a more detailed run through demo, drop a message in the chat or comment on WILDLABS on any of the articles Tobias has been posting, and we can organize that. And if you've got questions for Tobias, just drop them in the chat and he can pick them up now. Okay, I'm going to hand over. Like I said in the chat, we're skipping over our planned game show Ellie. I'm so sorry. But we're going to hand over to Natty right now as our main speaker. And do you want to take it away and share your work?
Sure, yes. Thank you very much. Let me just let's see, what are we seeing here? Should be a green screen.
You're good. You're looking great.
Okay. Whoops. All right, great. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Nathaniel Rindlaub, short for Nathaniel, and I'm a software developer on the Nature Conservancy's conservation tech team. And as Steph teed up earlier, I'm here to talk about a system we've developed over the past couple of years for real-time biosecurity monitoring using wireless camera traps and some computer vision. But before I kind of like dive into the tech stuff, a little bit of context about the project. And also, for starters, I should stress that I'm going to be talking quite a bit about biosecurity, which if you're not familiar with, essentially a term for efforts to reduce the risk of an invasive species introduction on a given ecosystem. And I'm going to be talking quite a bit about it because this kind of pairing of the wireless camera traps, the real-time images, and the automated ML inference really lends itself to this biosecurity use case. But for this audience especially, I want to just stress that I don't think that the utility of this system is limited per se to invasive species monitoring. I think there are lots of potential conservation problems or camera trapping projects in general that could benefit from this approach. So very curious to hear from you all if you have any thoughts on additional use cases that might be a good fit. The other thing I want to do real quick is sort of ground us a bit geographically. So the primary preserve we've been using as a test site for piloting the system is on Santa Cruz Island, which is, if you're not familiar, off the coast of Southern California. And it is the largest island in California at 96 square miles. It's also incredibly mountainous. It's got two really dramatic mountain ranges that are running kind of east to west, and its highest peak puts it among the tallest islands in North America. But also similarly to the kind of biosecurity thing, don't get hung up on the geography too much. I want to stress the system was not designed specifically to be used in Santa Cruz Island, on Santa Cruz Island. Same approach that I'm going to describe can be adapted and applied, we hope, to lots of different ecosystems and geographies. That said, islands are often uniquely vulnerable to invasives. So their isolation from the mainland simultaneously allows for their ecosystems to evolve and flourish in pretty exceptional ways. So of course, think like Galapagos, but because they've been sheltered from mainland threats for millennia, this also leaves them exposed and kind of fragile in the face of new species introductions. So on Santa Cruz Island, millions of years of isolation has produced a bunch of species not found anywhere else in the world, including 8 extremely rare plant species, a unique species of scrub jay you can see on the right here, and probably most famously the Santa Cruz Island fox over on the left, which are just these absolutely adorable little 4-pound foxes, and they're only found on SCI and a handful of other Channel Islands. And some quick history: about 20 years ago, they nearly went extinct, but some pretty bold actions by the Nature Conservancy and partners helped save them in what is now considered one of the fastest and most successful endangered species recovery programs in US history. But Santa Cruz Island, as you can see from this heat map, receives a ton of boat traffic, a ton of visitors, and also cargo really on a daily basis. And because of that, there's the potential for any number of mainland mammals to stow away in a boat, like in the hold of a boat, and make their way to shore. So cats and raccoons, for example, are a concern, and they have made their way out to other Channel Islands nearby in the past, but far and away, kind of the most likely invader and potentially the most damaging are rats. So why are rats such bad news? Well, they're highly resilient and adaptable, and they both outcompete and often prey directly on native island fauna, which of course has all kinds of cascading effects across these delicate ecosystems. This is an image that was taken on Anacapa Island, which is just 4 miles east of Santa Cruz Island, so a little too close for comfort. And it is kind of chowing down on one of its favorite food sources, shorebird eggs. Unlike Anacapa, Santa Cruz Island doesn't have rats and never has, but that the fact that it has been rat-free is pretty anomalous. So it's estimated that humans have introduced rats to 90% of the islands in the world. And as a result, rats have single-handedly caused half of all bird and reptile extinctions globally, which is quite shocking. And probably kind of most relevant to this conversation, and also very startling, is that a single pair of rats can produce 5,000 offspring in a single year, which means that, you know, if a pair of rats or a pregnant rat found its way out to the island, we would need to know about it immediately if we stood any chance of containing the incursion. So the question really is, how do we monitor this massive island that's 3 times the size of Manhattan, super mountainous, has no cell service for these tiny animals that don't, you know, as far as we know, actually exist there? And so the answer is, we think this first of its kind system for real-time remote biosecurity monitoring, and it's comprised of a network of wireless camera traps, automated lure dispensers, and cloud-based machine learning platform for automated species detection and alerts. So one way to think about it is like the whole thing is sort of like a Ring doorbell for rats. So let's get into the hardware a little bit. The specific cameras we're using are called Buckeye X80s. You may be familiar with them. Buckeye's the manufacturer, X80 the model. And they are unique in that they can communicate and transmit images to one another via low frequency, long range radio. It's called XB Pro, if you're familiar with that particular type of radio technology. You'll also notice that they are solar powered, which means that they require very little maintenance. And our oldest cameras have been out in the field on the island for well over 2 years, I think at this point, running nonstop, essentially without any human upkeep or intervention. The other really cool thing about them is that you can wirelessly pair them together to form a mesh network. So when an animal trips one on the far side of the island, that camera takes a photo and broadcasts it out to the next closest camera in the field. Then the cameras repeat this pattern of receiving and rebroadcasting the image up through the network until it reaches a base station. The base station in our case is comprised of a radio receiver, which demodulates the RF signal into a digital image. Image is then passed on to a fanless industrial computer. In the image on the right, this is sort of a prototype. You're going to recognize that as a Raspberry Pi, but we've kind of upgraded our system since then. And the computer is kind of responsible for uploading the image to the cloud, or specifically an S3 bucket if you're familiar with AWS tools. But the key point here is that aside from the base stations, which serve really as the gateways to the internet, none of the other cameras or devices in the network require any Wi-Fi or cell service. So again, they communicate 100% through this XB Pro radio. So this fact, combined with the fact that you can daisy chain them together to extend their range and, you know, circumvent challenging topography, is really what has allowed us to capture more or less real-time imagery across this vast remote island, again, with little to no internet access, other than these points at which we have base stations. So that's how the camera network functions at a high level, but you know, really at the risk of turning this into a full-on Buckeye advertisement, I want to pause and just plug a couple of the features that I think make these particular cameras pretty compelling. And I should also say, for those sort of wondering, you can probably guess that these cameras aren't super cheap. They're about twice as expensive as your typical Reconics. And for many camera trapping applications, they're almost certainly overkill. But I do think if you have need for long-term deployments in remote areas, you know, it can make a lot of sense, and that added cost can be recovered in like staff time savings alone. So as many of you, I'm sure, are familiar in your typical.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just interrupt. How much is it? Does it actually? We have Frank's wondering, and I'm wondering. Do you have a dollar?
You know, it depends how much you're going to dress it up with additional antennas and like various sort of modifications, but we're in around $1,000 per node, essentially. The other thing that I'll touch on in a second is that like a lot of times, like you're going to need to use repeater nodes in order to sort of like rebroadcast rebroadcast the images like around you know, up drainages and around hard to get to areas, and so that can also add to the cost. It really depends on your topography and the tree canopy and stuff like that. how many repeaters you need, which of course is going to add to the cost of the entire setup.
Cool.
Yeah. But of course, as you know, with a typical SD card based camera, like you set up the camera, you say your little prayer and then come back however many weeks or months later, hoping the camera didn't get knocked over or the batteries didn't get depleted in the first week from, you know, some leaves blowing like crazy in the wind. But with Buckeyes, once they're set up, of course, you don't have to return to fetch the SD cards or swap out the batteries. With the real-time images, you know essentially right away when something goes wrong. So you can be a lot more targeted with your maintenance efforts. And you can, if you address those issues quickly, you're going to get much more usable data for less effort and less time. And another cool feature is that a good amount of the maintenance can be done without leaving your house or office. So because the radio communication between the cameras is bidirectional, you can configure settings, get battery status reports, you can manually trigger their cameras. You can do all of that remotely. So again, say camera's firing too much, you notice during certain hours when the wind's particularly blowing strong or is overexposed at night, you can adjust those settings right from your computer at home. And again, repeaters kind of are these unsung heroes of the whole system. The cameras themselves and the repeaters can transmit images up to 7 miles. But the repeaters we've found have been super invaluable for extending range and deploying cameras in some really challenging locations. So for example, deep in heavily canopied drainages or even in caves. So after the images propagate up through the network on the island, they get uploaded to the cloud, at which point they enter sort of the software side of the system, which we call Animal. And we built Animal to solve for another challenge that plagues pretty much all camera trapping projects. Cameras, of course, fire at anything that moves, whether it's, you know, a giraffe or a blade of grass. So they very quickly can produce tens of thousands of images, many of which aren't particularly interesting to us and we don't really care about. Animal solves for this with an automated AI workflow in which new images get piped through a sequence of computer vision models to try to essentially determine what's in them. And like all ML models, ours are not 100% accurate by any means, so the predictions still require humans in the loop to review them, but it makes the review process much more efficient. And our automated alert system means that if a rodent gets detected by one of those models, we'll know about it within minutes of that picture having been taken. And also, I think I saw Dan Morris on the chat there, so shout out to Dan and the Microsoft AI for Earth team. Their object detection mega detector is one of the models we've got integrated in the app, and they've been super, super helpful. So this is a GIF of the user interface on the left, but I'd like to highlight something that I think is really important. And that is, we designed Animal to be a scalable camera trap data management platform. And so again, its utility is not limited to any one environment or use case. Rather than building a bespoke application that is specific to Santa Cruz Island and biosecurity and our, you know, Buckeye cameras out there, this software we tried to design it to be much more of a general purpose tool. So what does that mean exactly? We decided to do a couple things. So number one, we wanted to be camera trap agnostic. So make sure that it was able to ingest data from a variety of camera trap manufacturers and types, your Reconics, your Buckeyes, your cell-based cameras, what have you. Number two, allow for the easy integration of multiple machine learning models that could be suited for different environments or target species or different business use cases. And number three, kind of empower users to then configure customized and totally automated machine learning labeling pipelines. So for example, if you're interested in studying, you know, a wildlife crossing, for example, it might not make sense to check those images for our Santa Cruz Island fox. They're not going to be there. So to solve for that, users can configure custom sequences of models to run against their own specific subsets of images or cameras. Of course, send automated alerts, and then lastly, offer this front-end user interface on the left here that allows users to view their images, view the predictions, validate the labels, and configure all those alerts and machine learning pipelines to meet their particular needs. This is a probably too hard to read diagram of the application architecture on the left, which is almost entirely built out and hosted in AWS. Free of charge, I should say, so huge thank you to Marco and the folks at AWS who have been incredibly generous and have donated a bunch of compute credits to help get this thing off the ground. And if you're familiar with AWS, this is on the right, a list of just some of their infrastructure we're leveraging. Obviously, it's quite a bit, and really can't overstate how much of an enabler their products are for operationalizing ML models and building out like a really fully featured production application for conservation purposes. And like I said, the goal was really not to wire up a single data processing pipeline tailored to our specific use case and location. The goal was to build a platform, and AWS kind of made a lot of the aspects of that very, very easy. Shouldn't say easy, but made it possible for sure. Before I close out, I just want to take a stab at kind of explaining why we did this. You know, it was a lot of work, to build all the custom software and these kind of like using these niche expensive cameras. But I think it's worth pausing and asking why this hasn't been done before, because as a consumer and also as someone in the conservation tech space, it can feel like we're kind of surrounded by similar technology every day. And another way of framing it, I think, is like, you know, the Ring doorbell analogy I made before is pretty apt, but like, why not literally use Ring doorbells or some other commercial off-the-shelf option? Or on the software side, like, you know, I can look at my phone and my iPhone and it'll unlock itself. Like, how hard could it possibly be to identify a rat in a grainy camera trap photo? You know, essentially, aren't these problems already solved? And I will say that when I started digging into this project a couple of years ago and started looking for some commercial off-the-shelf solutions, I really had kind of assumed they were. And if it wasn't out right now, you know, maybe we wait another month or two. But a solution never materialized, and I came to realize the reason is kind of twofold. The first is that every aspect of IoT is hard, and you all probably know this. I can't stress it enough. You're essentially running small electronics exposed to pretty extreme elements in remote places, and figuring out how to connect them to the internet is not trivial. You're extremely power constrained, right? You got to work with whatever the sun's going to give you on a given day, and by extension, extremely compute constrained, because of course it takes a lot of energy to do complex computations in the field. There's also a lot of different sort of radio technologies to choose from. So you've got cellular, satellite, Bluetooth, LoRa, others I'm sure, but there's always a really delicate trade-off between kind of the bandwidth, the range of the transmission, the power consumption, and the cost for all of these things. And for this to be viable and scalable solution, we're going to have to deploy a lot more of these devices to put probably hundreds, maybe thousands across remote islands. So figuring out how to do that cheaply is really challenging. And to the machine learning point, it turns out, to my surprise, but maybe not your all's surprise, that computer vision on camera trap imagery is also very hard. But it starts to make sense once you think about it a little bit. So in pictures that humans have taken, of course, which is what most ML models are trained on, and really what most pictures are, typically the subject is in focus, it's in the center of the frame, obvious what the photo is of. And if you were to go look for training data for your like teapot classifier, you could do Google image search and instantly get millions of different teapots of all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds. And that kind of sample diversity combined with the subject clarity is going to really help out a lot. Camera trap images, of course, on the other hand, subject might be 2 inches away from the camera and completely out of focus, taking up the whole frame, or 20 feet away and 90% obscured by, you know, a bush or what have you. It's just wildly uncontrolled. And what's more, your training data might include 200,000 images, but they might have only been taken at 12 locations. And so the backgrounds of the images, of course, don't change too much. They're fixed cameras. So what typically happens is the models get really good at detecting animals in very specific locations. And as soon as you point the camera elsewhere, the performance tanks because the models have learned too much about the background and can't really generalize. So it's just hard, and I'm not going to pretend like we've nailed it. There's a lot of room for improvements in our models. But one of the early decisions we made was to focus on building out the platform that would essentially allow us to easily bring online new models and integrate them with our existing data stream so that we could rapidly operationalize new developments in the computer vision space. In closing, again, cannot stress enough how important rapid invasive species detection is in the context of biosecurity, both from an ecological perspective, but also a financial one. So that rat photo from Anacapa that I showed earlier, they were eradicated in 2001, but at the tune of $5 million. And Anacapa is tiny compared to Santa Cruz Island. It has an area of 1 square mile versus 96 square miles. So in the context of safeguarding the pretty historic conservation victories on the island, investing in prevention and early detection is money extremely well spent. And with global warming, resource scarcity, and globalization all on the rise, there are many, many other islands with flora and fauna not found anywhere else in the world that are more vulnerable than ever to invasive mammals. So we see the Biosecurity Network on Santa Cruz Island as a model for cost-effective remote monitoring at scale. And our focus now is improving the models, working with partners to demonstrate efficacy, in new geographies, and catalyzing adoption at regional and hopefully global scale. Very last slide. Thank you all very much for your time, and would love any feedback you might have. Other conservation use cases that come to mind that might be applicable, other products, people working in the space we should be talking to, any blind spots or assumptions that you can help point out. All of that extremely helpful. So feel free to share your thoughts in the chat or questions in the Q&A, but don't hesitate to reach out after the call either. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Nettie. That was really interesting. I will say that it would be great to have this as a discussion on Wild Labs, because there's like so much meat here, and to be able to pick it up beyond this group. Are you staying around? Are you able to stay around for like?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll pick up actually I'll get you to bring that slide back up in the after hours once we start recording, so we can have like a bit of a more open discussion, because you had a lot of questions coming through. I'm aware we're on the hour, so I'm not going to let any questions come through right now. Do you want to just stop sharing? I want to.
Oh yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was. Okay.
I want to say thank you, and we'll pick up the discussion with the group afterwards. If anyone's, as many people who'd like to hang out as are welcome. And so to wrap us up in the last few minutes, I just want to have a quick space for people to make announcements and ask for what they need or offer help that they can give, or something. If you have something to offer, if you have a need that you want to ask for help, or just put it out there, or you have news to share, please, this is now your space. Drop in the chat. I know some people, because you've written in your registration, but if you want to say something, can you just put your hand up? And Thomas Gray, I'm going to throw to you first, because I know you've got something to share.
All right, I'm turning everything back on here.
Your sound is like, for a SAT guy, your sound, it's ironically rubbish. But yes, did you want to talk about the brand?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because I have a legit microphone and everything, but whatever.
Oh, it's much better now. Yeah, it's much better.
Yeah, so anyways, I'll make it really short. But what we're trying to do is, in short, give away open source circuit boards so that people can develop their own in-house transmitters, or I should say not really their own in-house transmitters, but add the ability to transmit something through satellite without, let's say, buying a commercial off-the-shelf system. So we're providing the hardware side of that for the Argos satellite network, as well as the cost of the satellite time, so that, let's say, a researcher's development costs really be their own time investment in learning how to code and Python. But anyways, we still have this grant project going on where we give away some of the Argos PCBs and the free service. You can catch me on the Wild Labs. I think I have a post there somewhere. I'll put my email in the chat.
Awesome. We'll drop in, one of our team will drop in the link to what you're talking about. Okay. David, do you want to jump in? Are you telling new news or old news?
Newish news.
Okay, go.
So I just wanted to let everyone know, and I'm starting a new job this fall. It's going to be very exciting. I'm transitioning out of the conservation tech space a little bit to working on the power grid. But I want to kind of keep those two areas of interest for me interacting as much as I can. So I'm looking for like case studies where people are applying technology for wildlife monitoring in power generation, transmission, all that kind of stuff. There's some of my conversations, people don't really know that these tools are out there and available. And so having more case studies would be cool. I have a thread up on Wild Labs that I'm just linking in the chat right now. If you're aware of anything, please throw it in there so I can see it. And I'd love to try to kind of connect more on that if anyone is interested in that area.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's really exciting news. And Nettie, do you have an announcement that you wanted to jump in with?
Yes, I do.
Right.
So yes. So on the 23rd of August, which is Tuesday next week, I'll be hosting Lewis Frost, who's the COO of Serestag, for a live Q&A session in the East Africa community, as well as the biologging group. So Lewis will be taking us through the IoT biologging devices that they've built, and a brief run through of some of the models on animal monitoring, and also a look into the future of biologging. So join us, and if you have any questions for Lewis, you can drop them in the discussion thread that I'll share in the chat. So I hope to see you all there.
Awesome. Thank you, Nettie. And I'm going to wrap us up with 3 conversations that are open on Wild Labs that I just think are kind of cool or interesting, or you guys might be interested in. One is from Sebastian, who's looking for underwater fish data sets from the Mediterranean for their Fish ID project. Maya's looking for plant and animal ecoacoustic specialists in the Alps for a documentary thing. So if you know someone in that space, jump in there. Oh, and my final one is David, who's looking for advice about dealing with cows while camera trapping, which is a serious issue, but also is quite funny. Tanya, I would suggest internships. And this actually goes for everyone. On Wild Labs, there are heaps of career opportunities and funding opportunities open at the moment. So just pop on and look at conservation tech related. Go to our resource area and filter for career opportunities. But also, we've just given everyone permission to now add your own career opportunities if you're hiring. So it's now a post type that you can go and add yourself. So please we know a lot of people who recruit through Wild Labs, so please use our resources and our posts that way as well. All right, we're 10 minutes over. It was an ambitious aim. We will think about how to do it differently, but also as enthusiastically next time. So we hope we'll see you. We'll see you next month for a similarly chaotic but enjoyable variety hour. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. And if you want to hang out and have a conversation and do Ellie's quiz, please do. You're most welcome. But otherwise, we'll see you all very soon.